Danny Cole woke up tired. His eyes hurt and his head felt heavy. He had spent the whole night reading documents and preparing reports for Ambassador Katie Monroe. Now it was morning on Harmony Prime, the giant space station where dozens of alien species came together for peace talks and trade deals. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Confederacy 3 years ago. They were still the new species, the strangers that nobody fully understood. Danny did not think about this much. He was just an assistant, a regular guy who happened to work in space. And right now, the only thing on his mind was coffee. He could not function without coffee. Back on Earth, he drank 3 cups every morning. Here on the station, he had to make it himself because no alien species understood what coffee was. They had their own drinks and foods, but nothing like the dark, bitter liquid that Danny needed to start his day. He grabbed his portable coffee kit from the small cabinet in his room. It was a simple setup. A hand grinder for the beans, a glass pour-over cone, paper filters, a small electric kettle, and a bag of dark roasted beans that he had brought from Earth. These supplies were precious. The next shipment from home would not arrive for 2 more months. Danny walked through the quiet corridors of the station. The lights were dim because it was still early in the station's artificial day cycle. Most diplomats were either sleeping or preparing for the morning sessions. Danny liked this time. It was peaceful. He could make his coffee in the shared lounge without anyone bothering him. The diplomatic lounge was a large room with tall windows that looked out into space. Stars filled the black sky like scattered diamonds. Different types of furniture sat around the room because different alien species had different bodies. Some chairs were very tall. Some were wide and flat. Some looked like hammocks. Danny walked past all of them to the small kitchen area in the corner. He was not alone in the lounge. 4 aliens sat near the windows, talking quietly among themselves. They were Cathari, an insectoid species with shiny black shells and large compound eyes. Their leader was Ambassador Vexthari, a respected diplomat known for being nervous and cautious. The Cathari had a long history of being conquered by other species, so they were always watching for danger. Danny nodded politely at them as he entered. Vexthari's many eyes tracked his movement, but the ambassador said nothing. Danny did not think anything of it. Some aliens were friendly. Some were quiet. That was normal. He set his coffee kit on the counter and began unpacking. First, he pulled out the metal hand grinder. It was a cylinder with a handle on top that he would turn to crush the beans. Then, he took out the glass kettle and filled it with water from the dispenser. He plugged it in and turned it on. A small red light appeared, showing that the water was heating. Danny opened his bag of coffee beans and poured some into the grinder. The beans were dark brown, almost black, and they smelled wonderful to him. He attached the handle and began turning it. The grinder made a loud crunching sound as it crushed the beans into powdered dot at the table by the window. Vexthari stopped talking. All 4 of his compound eyes focused on the human. He watched Danny turning the handle of the metal device with intense concentration. The crunching sound was harsh and mechanical. Dark powder fell into the bottom of the cylinder. One of Vexthari's aides leaned close and whispered, "What is he doing?" "I do not know," Vexthari replied, "but I do not like it." They watched as Danny finished grinding and opened the cylinder. He poured the dark powder into a paper cone sitting on top of a glass container. The powder looked fine and dangerous to Cathari eyes. They had seen weapons that used similar substances, explosives, poisons, chemical agents. The kettle began to steam. Danny checked the temperature on a small display and waited. He wanted the water at exactly the right heat. Too hot, and the coffee would taste burned. Too cold, and it would taste weak. Vexthari felt his heart beating faster. The human was heating something. He was preparing chemicals. This looked like a ritual, careful and precise. The Cathari had seen other species perform preparation rituals before battle. They knew the signs. Should we leave? 1-8 asked. Slowly, Vexthari said. Do not alarm him. We do not know what humans do when they feel threatened. The 4 Cathari stood up quietly and moved toward the door. Danny did not notice. He was focused on his kettle, waiting for the perfect temperature. His back was turned to them. Once they were in the corridor, Vexthari pulled out his communication device and contacted station security. This is Ambassador Vexthari. I need to report suspicious activity in the diplomatic lounge. A human is preparing something. Chemicals and heat and some kind of grinding mechanism. I believe it may be dangerous. The security office responded immediately. Understood, Ambassador. We are sending Chief Gorath to investigate. Security Chief Gorath was a Bruthan, a species known for their size and strength. He stood nearly 8 feet tall and had 4 muscular arms. His skin was thick and gray like stone. The Bruthan were warriors by nature, but Gorath had dedicated his life to keeping peace on the station. He took every threat seriously. He pulled up the security cameras and watched the human in the lounge. He saw the metal grinder. He saw the dark powder. He saw the heating device with steam rising from it. The human was moving slowly and carefully, like someone handling dangerous materials. Alert the response team, Gorath said to his officers. Prepare for possible chemical threat. Do not engage until I give the order. We need to understand what we are dealing with. Back in the lounge, Danny finally poured the hot water over the coffee grounds. The dark liquid began dripping through the filter and into the glass container below. The smell filled the air, rich and bitter and perfect. Danny smiled. This was his favorite moment of the day. He had no idea that 6 armed security officers were taking positions outside the lounge doors. He did not know that Ambassador Vexthari had triggered an emergency protocol. He did not notice that every camera in the room was now focused on him. He just watched the coffee drip and thought about how good that first sip was going to taste in the security office. Gorath studied the human's calm expression. The creature showed no fear, no hesitation. It was completely focused on its task. Gorath had seen that look before, on the faces of soldiers preparing for combat. What are you planning, human? He muttered to himself. He gave the order to mobilize the full security team. Whatever the human was doing, Gorath would be ready to stop it. Katie Monroe was in the middle of a trade negotiation when her communication device started buzzing. She ignored it at first. The meeting was important, and she was close to securing a deal that would benefit Earth for decades. But the device kept buzzing. Again and again. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop. The message was from station security. It said there was a human threat situation in the diplomatic lounge and that her assistant had been detained. Excuse me, she said to the alien representatives across the table. I have an emergency. We will continue this later. She did not wait for their response. She was already running out the door. Katie was a tall woman in her 40s with short gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been a diplomat for 20 years, first on Earth and then in space. She had handled crises before. Hostage situations, trade wars, political scandals. But she had never received a message saying her assistant was a threat. Danny Cole was not dangerous. He was a kind, simple man who liked coffee and old movies and terrible jokes. The idea of him being a threat was laughable. Something had gone very wrong. She ran through the corridors of the station, her boots making loud sounds on the metal floor. Other diplomats and workers stepped aside as she passed. The look on her face told them not to get in her way. When she reached the diplomatic lounge, she found a crowd gathered outside. Ambassador Vexthari was there, along with several other alien representatives. Security officers stood guard at the doors. What happened? Katie demanded. Vexthari turned to face her. His compound eyes reflected her image dozens of times. Your assistant was preparing something dangerous in the lounge. We called security as a precaution. Dangerous? Danny? What was he preparing? Some kind of dark powder. He was grinding it with a metal device and heating water. It looked like a chemical weapon. Katie stared at him for a long moment. Then she started laughing. It was not a polite laugh. It was a loud, full laugh that echoed down the corridor. She bent over and put her hands on her knees, struggling to breathe. Tears formed in the corners of her eyes. The aliens watched her with growing concern. This was not normal behavior. Was the human having some kind of breakdown? Ambassador Monroe, Vexthari said carefully. Are you well? Katie wiped her eyes and stood up straight. She was still smiling. He was making coffee. I do not understand. Coffee. It is a drink. Humans drink it every morning. Danny cannot function without his coffee. You'd called security because he was making breakfast. Vexthari's eyes flickered with confusion. A drink? But the powder, the heating, the ritual movements. That is how you make coffee. You grind beans, heat water, and pour it through a filter. It is not dangerous. It is not a weapon. It is just a hot beverage that helps us wake up. The other aliens in the crowd began whispering to each other. A drink? All this panic over a drink? Some of them felt embarrassed. Others were still not convinced. Where's Danny now? Katie asked. Security Chief Gorath took him to the security office for questioning. Katie stopped smiling. You detained him? For making coffee? We did not know what he was doing. We had to be careful. Katie understood their fear. She really did. Humans were new to the galaxy, and other species did not know their customs. But understanding did not make her less frustrated. Danny was probably terrified right now, surrounded by armed guards who thought he was a criminal. Take me to him, she said. Vexthari led her to the security office with two of his aides following behind. The corridors of the security section were cold and gray. Armed officers stood at every corner. This part of the station was designed for threats, not diplomacy. They reached an interrogation room where Danny sat at a metal table. Gorath stood across from him, arms crossed. 4 security officers lined the walls. Danny looked pale and confused. His coffee mug sat on the table, now completely cold. Chief Gorath, Katie said as she entered. Release my assistant immediately. Gorath turned to face her. Ambassador Monroe, your assistant was found preparing an unknown substance. We have a duty to investigate. The substance is coffee. It is a common human drink. Billions of humans consume it daily. It is not a weapon, not a drug, and not dangerous to anyone except maybe Danny's sleep schedule. How can we be certain? Because I have worked with Danny for 3 years, and I have watched him make coffee hundreds of times. Because humans have been drinking coffee for over 1,000 years. Because if coffee was dangerous, half of Earth's population would be dead. Gorath did not respond immediately. He was trained to be suspicious, but he was also trained to recognize when he was wrong. The human female seemed completely confident. She showed no signs of deception. Danny, Katie said, explain to them what coffee is. Danny looked up. He still seemed shaken, but Katie's presence gave him courage. It is made from coffee beans. They grow on plants on Earth. You roast the beans, grind them into powder, and pour hot water through them. The water absorbs the flavor and the caffeine. Then you drink it. Caffeine? Gorath asked. It is a natural chemical in the beans. It makes you feel more awake and alert. Humans get tired easily, especially in the morning. Coffee helps us function. So you are saying this substance alters your mental state? Danny hesitated. I mean, a little. It just helps me think clearly. Without coffee, I am slow and grumpy. With coffee, I can actually do my job. Gorath considered this. You are telling me that humans require this chemical to perform basic functions? Not require, exactly. But it helps a lot. And millions of your species consume this substance daily? Billions, Katie said. Coffee is one of the most traded goods on Earth. We have entire businesses dedicated to it. We have rituals and traditions around it. Some humans spend their whole lives studying how to make the perfect cup. Vextari spoke from the doorway. This seems like an addiction. Your species is dependent on a plant chemical. Katie shrugged. You could call it that, but it is a harmless addiction. Coffee does not hurt anyone. It does not make humans violent or dangerous. It just makes us slightly more pleasant to be around in the morning. Gorath looked at Danny. The human did not look like a threat. He looked tired and confused and a little sad about his cold coffee. This was not the face of a warrior preparing for combat. This was the face of someone who just wanted to finish his breakfast. Medical team, Gorath said. Scan the substance and confirm it is not harmful. A medical officer approached the table and ran a scanner over the coffee mug. The device beeped and displayed results on a small screen. The substance contains water, organic compounds, and trace amounts of caffeine, the officer reported. It is not toxic. It is not explosive. It poses no threat to station inhabitants. Gorath nodded slowly. He looked at Danny, then at Katie, then at the cold coffee sitting on the table. It appears we have made an error, he said. Katie smiled. Yes, you have. But I understand why. You did not know about coffee. You saw something strange and reacted to protect the station. I cannot blame you for that. She turned to Danny. Are you okay? Danny nodded. Yeah, just confused. And my coffee is cold now. We can make more. Danny managed a small smile. Promise? Promise. Gorath stepped back and lowered his arms. The security officers relaxed their positions. The tension in the room began to fade. But outside, in the corridors of the station, dozens of aliens were still wondering what had happened and what this strange human drink, called coffee, really was. This incident was not over. It was just beginning. Security Chief Gorath watched the human through the camera feed. The creature was performing some kind of ritual with dark powder and boiling water. Every movement was slow and precise. The human poured water in small circles, waited, then poured again. It looked almost religious. Gorath had read the files on humans. They were a young species from a small planet called Earth. They were fragile compared to Bruthen, with soft skin and weak bodies. But the reports also said they were unpredictable. They had a history of violence on their homeworld. Wars, conflicts, destruction. The Galactic Confederacy had accepted them as members. But many species still did not trust them. Chief, what are your orders? Asked Officer Dren, a young Bruthen standing at his side. Gorath thought carefully. He did not want to start a diplomatic incident. Humans were new to the Confederacy, and any conflict could damage relations for years. But he also could not ignore a potential threat. If the human was preparing a weapon, Gorath had a duty to protect everyone on the station. Evacuate the nearby sections quietly, Gorath said. Move all non-essential personnel away from the diplomatic lounge. Do not alert the human. I want stun weapons only. We will observe and act if necessary. Yes, Chief. The evacuation began. Officers moved through the corridors, gently guiding aliens away from the area. They gave no explanation, only said there was a security concern and asked everyone to relocate temporarily. Most species complied without question. They trusted Gorath and his team. In the lounge, Danny finished his pour-over and set down the kettle. The glass container was now full of dark brown liquid. Steam rose from its surface. Danny lifted it to his nose and inhaled deeply. The smell was perfect. Strong and rich with just a hint of chocolate notes. He looked around the lounge and noticed it was empty. The four Cathari who had been sitting by the window were gone. In fact, the whole room was silent. Danny shrugged. Maybe everyone had left for the early morning sessions. Diplomats were always busy. He poured the coffee into his favorite ceramic mug. It was white with a small blue earth printed on the side. Katie had given it to him as a birthday gift last year. He carried it everywhere. Danny took his first sip and closed his eyes. The warmth spread through his chest. The caffeine would soon reach his brain and wake him up properly. For now, he just enjoyed the taste. This was peace. This was happiness. Outside the lounge, Ambassador Vexthari stood with a group of worried diplomats. Word had spread quickly about the human situation. Representatives from 5 different species had gathered in the corridor, speaking in hushed voices. "What is he doing in there?" asked a Mallory diplomat, a thin blue creature with large silver eyes. "We do not know," Vexthari replied. He was grinding some dark substance and heating water. It could be a chemical weapon. It could be a bomb. Humans are capable of terrible things. "I have heard stories," the Mallory said. "On their home world, they created weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single blast. They poisoned their own air and water. They are a self-destructive species. And now one of them is alone in our diplomatic lounge with unknown materials." Fear spread through the group. They had all heard stories about humans. Some were true. Some were exaggerated. But in this moment, standing outside a room where a human performs strange rituals with powder and heat, every story felt real. Gorath arrived with his security team. 6 officers in full protective gear, carrying stun rifles. Their gray armor made them look like living statues. The diplomats moved aside to let them pass. "Ambassador Vexthari," Gorath said. "Tell me exactly what you saw." Vexthari described everything. The metal grinding device, the dark powder, the heating element, the careful, focused movements, the way the human seemed completely absorbed in his task. Gorath nodded slowly. "It sounds like preparation. Humans are known to perform rituals before combat. They focus their minds. They prepare their tools. This matches the pattern. What will you do?" "We will confront him. Carefully. If he cooperates, there will be no violence. If he resists..." Gorath left the sentence unfinished. Inside the lounge, Danny was on his second sip of coffee when he noticed movement through the glass doors. He saw shapes in the corridor. Large shapes. Were those security officers? Why were they gathered outside? He walked toward the doors to get a better look. As he approached, the doors slid open automatically, and he found himself face to face with Security Chief Gorath. Danny had seen Gorath before, but never this close. The Bruthan was enormous. His forearms were thick with muscle. His face was hard and expressionless. Behind him stood 6 armed officers with weapons raised. Danny said. "Good morning?" "Human," Gorath said, his voice deep and serious. "Step away from the door. Keep your hands where we can see them." Danny looked down at his hands. One was holding his coffee mug. The other was empty. He had no idea what was happening. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "Put down the container," Gorath ordered. Slowly, Danny looked at his mug, then back at Gorath. "My coffee? Whatever substance you have prepared, put it down now." Danny's brain was still waking up. The caffeine had not fully kicked in yet. He could not understand why armed security officers were pointing weapons at him over a cup of coffee. This had to be a mistake. Some kind of misunderstanding. "Okay, he said slowly. I am going to put down my mug. Please do not shoot me. He bent down carefully and placed the mug on the floor. Then he stood up and raised both hands. Good, Gorath said. Now step away from the chemical compound and come with us. Chemical compound? Danny was completely confused. That is just coffee. I made it from beans. It is a drink. Gorath did not lower his weapon. You expect us to believe that dark substance is simply a beverage? Yes, humans drink it every day. Millions of us. Billions probably. It helps us wake up in the morning. The security officers exchanged glances. This was not the response they expected. The humans seemed genuinely confused, not aggressive. But Gorath had been trained to never underestimate a potential threat. You will come with us for questioning, Gorath said. We will analyze your substance and determine if it is dangerous. You want to test my coffee? We want to ensure the safety of this station. Danny wanted to argue, but he was surrounded by armed guards and a giant four-armed warrior. This was not the time for debate. He nodded and stepped forward. As he walked past his mug on the floor, he felt a deep sadness. That was perfectly good coffee going to waste. He had spent 10 minutes making it. The temperature would be wrong by the time this mess got sorted out. Gorath led him down the corridor toward the security office. The gathered diplomats watched in silence as the human was escorted away. Some felt relief. Others felt curiosity. A few felt something close to guilt. Ambassador Vexthari stared at the human's back as he walked away. The creature did not look dangerous now. It looked confused and tired. Could they have made a mistake? Could all this fear be for nothing? He pushed the thought away. It was better to be safe. The Kithari had learned that lesson many times throughout their history. You can never be too careful with strange species. In the lounge, the white mug sat alone on the floor. The coffee inside was growing cold. Steam no longer rose from its surface. The small blue earth on the side seemed to stare out at the empty room, waiting for someone to come back. But Danny Cole was now in the security office, trying to explain the concept of coffee to aliens who had never heard of it. This was going to be a very long morning. Word traveled fast on Harmony Prime. By midday, everyone on the station had heard about the coffee incident. The story changed as it spread, becoming stranger and more exaggerated with each telling. Some said the human had been building a bomb. Others said he had tried to poison the water supply. A few claimed the whole thing was a test to see how aliens would react to human aggression. The truth was much simpler, but simple truths are often the hardest to believe. Katie Monroe called an emergency meeting in the main conference hall. She invited representatives from every species on the station. Security Chief Gorath attended as well, standing at the back of the room with his arms folded. Ambassador Vexthari sat in the front row, his compound eyes watching everything. Danny stood next to Katie at the front of the room. He had brought his entire coffee kit: the grinder, the pour-over cone, the kettle, and a fresh bag of beans. He felt nervous with so many alien eyes watching him, but Katie had said this was important. If they did not explain coffee properly, the misunderstanding could damage human relations for years. Thank you all for coming, Katie began. I know there has been confusion about what happened this morning. I am here to clear things up and introduce you to an important part of human culture. She gestured to Danny. This is my assistant, Danny Cole. He's going to demonstrate the preparation of coffee, the substance that caused so much concern. Danny stepped forward and set his equipment on a small table. His hands were shaking slightly, but he tried to stay calm. He had made coffee thousands of times. He could do this. Coffee comes from a plant that grows on Earth, he explained. The plant produces small red fruits, and inside each fruit is a seed. We call these seeds beans. We harvest the beans, dry them, and roast them over heat until they turned dark brown. He held up his bag of beans so everyone could see. These are roasted coffee beans. They are completely harmless. You could eat them raw if you wanted, though they do not taste very good that way. Several aliens leaned forward to get a better look. The beans did not look dangerous. They looked like small brown pebbles. Danny poured some beans into his grinder. This device crushes the beans into powder. The crushing sound is loud, but the machine is not a weapon. It is just a simple tool. He began turning the handle. The familiar crunching sound filled the room. Some aliens flinched at the noise, but most watched with curiosity. When Danny finished, he opened the grinder and showed them the fine brown powder inside. This is ground coffee. It is the substance that Ambassador Vexthari saw this morning. It might look like a chemical compound, but it is just crushed plant seeds. He set up his pour-over cone with a paper filter and poured the grounds inside. Then he filled his kettle with water and turned it on. Now I heat the water. The ideal temperature for coffee is around 90 to 96 degrees Celsius. Too hot and the coffee tastes burned. Too cold and it tastes weak. Humans are very particular about their water temperature. The kettle began to steam. Danny watched the temperature display carefully. The aliens watched him with equal attention. Gorath remained expressionless, but his eyes never left the kettle dot when the water reached the right temperature. Danny began pouring it over the grounds in slow circular motions. The dark liquid dripped through the filter and into the glass container below. This is the brewing process. The hot water absorbs the flavor and caffeine from the ground beans. It takes a few minutes to complete. The room was silent except for the soft sound of dripping liquid. A rich, bitter smell filled the air. Some aliens wrinkled their noses or made sounds of displeasure. Others seemed intrigued by the strange aroma. When the brewing was done, Danny poured the coffee into a cup and held it up. And this is coffee, a hot drink that humans consume to increase energy and alertness. It is bitter, but many of us find the taste pleasant. Some humans add sugar or milk to make it sweeter. He took a sip and sighed with satisfaction. This is what billions of humans do every single morning. It is not a weapon. It is not a threat. It is just a way to start the day. Katie stepped forward. I want to thank you all for listening. I know humans are still new to the Confederacy, and our customs might seem strange. But I hope this demonstration shows that not everything unfamiliar is dangerous. Sometimes the things that look the most suspicious are completely harmless. A Mallory diplomat raised a thin blue hand. May I ask a question? Of course. You said this drink contains caffeine, which alters your mental state. Is this not a form of drug use? Danny answered before Katie could respond. Caffeine is a mild stimulant. It makes you feel more awake, but it does not impair judgment or cause hallucinations. Many species consume substances that affect their bodies in various ways. You eat food for energy. You drink water for hydration. We drink coffee for alertness. It is not so different. The Mallory considered this and nodded. I suppose that makes sense. Ambassador Vexthari stood up slowly. The room fell silent. Everyone knew he had been the one to trigger the security alert. His words now carried significant weight. I owe you an apology, he said to Danny. I saw you preparing this drink and assumed the worst. My people have a long history of being attacked by species we did not understand. We learned to be suspicious of anything unfamiliar. But suspicion without understanding leads to fear, and fear leads to conflict. He walked toward the table where Danny stood. I judged you by my fears instead of by your actions. That was wrong. Danny felt a wave of emotion he did not expect. He had been scared and confused all morning, treated like a criminal for doing something completely ordinary. Part of him wanted to be angry. But looking at Vex's story now, he saw not a villain but a frightened creature trying to protect his people. "I understand," Danny said. "If I saw someone doing something I did not recognize, I might be scared too. We are all just trying to survive in a big, confusing galaxy." He looked down at his coffee, then back at Vex's story. An idea formed in his mind. It was a small gesture, but sometimes small gestures matter most. "Would you like to try some?" Vex's story's eyes flickered with surprise. "You would offer me your drink?" "After what I did." "That is what humans do. When we want to make peace, we share food and drink. It is our way of saying we trust each other." Danny poured a small amount of coffee into a second cup and held it out. The room watched in silence. This was a moment that would be remembered. Vex's story reached out with one of his clawed hands and took the cup. He brought it to his face and inhaled. His antennae twitched at the strong smell. "It is very bitter," he said. "Yes, it is." Vex's story took a tiny sip. His whole body shuddered. His compound eyes blinked rapidly. He set the cup down with a look of pure displeasure. "That is terrible," he said. Danny laughed. He could not help it. The tension broke, and suddenly other aliens were making sounds that might have been laughter too. Even Gorath cracked a small smile. "Not everyone likes coffee," Danny admitted. "But thank you for trying." Vex's story straightened his posture and looked at Danny with new respect. "You are a strange species. You drink bitter poison for pleasure, and you offer it to your enemies as a sign of peace." "We are full of contradictions," Katie said. "But I think that is what makes us interesting." Gorath stepped forward from the back of the room. "I would like to request a formal briefing on human customs. There may be other behaviors we have misunderstood. I would rather learn about them in a conference room than respond to them with armed guards." Katie nodded. "That is an excellent idea. We will schedule a cultural exchange session. Danny can teach you about coffee, breakfast, morning routines, and any other human habits that might seem unusual." She looked around the room at the gathered aliens. "And I hope other species will share their customs as well. We are all strangers to each other. The only way to become friends is to learn." There was a murmur of agreement from the crowd. Something had shifted in the room. The fear was not completely gone, but it had been replaced by something better. Curiosity. Danny looked at his coffee kit and smiled. He had never thought his morning ritual would become a diplomatic event. But if making coffee could bring species together, maybe it was worth the cold cups and the armed guards. Maybe this strange galaxy was not so scary after all. 2 weeks passed since the coffee incident. Life on Harmony Prime had changed in small but important ways. The fear that once surrounded humans had begun to fade. In its place grew something new. Understanding that Katie Monroe kept her promise. She organized a human culture exchange session in the main hall, and the response exceeded everyone's expectations. Representatives from 12 different species attended. They came to learn about the strange creatures from Earth, the ones who drank bitter plant water and performed mysterious morning rituals. Danny became the unofficial ambassador of human weirdness. He taught the aliens about coffee, of course, but also about tea, breakfast foods, stretching exercises, yawning, sneezing, and the human need for sunlight. Each topic sparked new questions. Each answer revealed how different humans were from other species. "You need to stand in sunlight, or your bones become weak?" asked a Mallory diplomat, his silver eyes wide with disbelief. "Not exactly," Danny explained. "Sunlight helps our bodies produce a vitamin that keeps our bones healthy. Without it, we can get sick over time. That is why we have lamps in our quarters that mimic sunlight." "Your species is remarkably fragile," the Mallory observed. "We are," Danny admitted. "But we survive anyway. Humans are good at finding solutions to our problems." The exchange sessions became a regular event. Once a week, aliens gathered to learn something new about humanity. And in return, humans learned about other species. Danny discovered that Ketheri communicated partly through scent, which explained why Vexthari's antennae always twitched during conversations. Katie learned that Bruthen did not sleep the way humans did. They entered a standing rest state for a few hours each day, remaining partially alert even while their bodies recovered. The station was becoming a place of genuine connection, not just political negotiation. One morning, Danny walked into the diplomatic lounge for his daily coffee ritual. The room was no longer empty during the early hours. Several aliens had started coming at the same time, curious to watch the human prepare his drink. They kept a respectful distance, but observed with genuine interest. Danny did not mind the audience. He set up his equipment and began the familiar process. Grinding, heating, pouring. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. By now, most aliens recognized the aroma. Some still found it unpleasant, but they no longer associated it with danger. Ambassador Vexthari entered the lounge and walked directly toward Danny. This had also become a regular occurrence. Despite his hatred of the actual drink, Vexthari was fascinated by the ritual itself. He found the precise movements calming to watch. "Good morning, Danny Cole," he said. "Good morning, Ambassador. Your ritual seems longer today." Danny smiled. "I am trying a new technique. A slower pour for a smoother taste. My friend back on Earth recommended it." Vexthari watched as Danny dripped water in tiny circles over the grounds. Humans put great care into small things. We do. Sometimes the small things are what make life worth living. The coffee finished brewing. Danny poured himself a cup and took a long sip. Perfect. His friend had been right about the technique. A shadow fell over the table. Danny looked up and saw a young Bruthen officer standing nearby. He recognized her as one of the guards who had pointed a weapon at him 2 weeks ago. Her name was Cora, and she worked under Security Chief Garth. "Human," she said. Her voice was deep but uncertain. "I have a request." Danny set down his cup. "What can I do for you?" Cora hesitated. Her forearms shifted nervously at her sides. For a warrior species, she looked surprisingly anxious. "I would like to try the coffee," she said finally. Danny blinked in surprise. The Bruthen were known for their strict discipline and their rejection of foreign substances. For Cora to ask for coffee was highly unusual. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Most aliens find it unpleasant." "I am sure. I've watched you drink it every morning for 2 weeks. You seem to enjoy it greatly. I wish to understand why." Danny nodded slowly. He poured a small amount of coffee into a spare cup and handed it to her. Cora took it in one of her massive hands. The cup looked tiny against her gray fingers. She brought it to her lips and drank. Her stone-like face showed no expression at first. Then her eyes narrowed slightly. Her mouth twitched. "It is very bitter," she said. "Yes, and very hot. That is how humans prefer it." Cora took another sip, longer this time. She swallowed and stood in silence for a moment, analyzing the sensation. "I do not hate it," she said finally. Danny felt a strange sense of pride. That is high praise from a Bruthen. The bitterness has a certain strength to it. It reminds me of a drink from my homeworld, made from fermented rock moss. We drink it before battle to sharpen our minds. Coffee serves a similar purpose for humans. We drink it before work to sharpen our minds. Cora looked at the cup in her hand with new respect. Perhaps our species are not so different after all. She drained the rest of the coffee in one gulp, handed the cup back to Danny, and walked away without another word. But Danny saw something in her eyes that had not been there before. A small spark of connection. Vexthari made a sound that might have been amusement. "You have converted a Bruthen warrior to your bitter water cult." Danny laughed. I would not go that far, but maybe I gave her something to think about. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The coffee ritual became a fixture of station life. Danny always made extra now, just in case someone wanted to try. Most aliens still declined, but a few brave souls took small sips. A Malari discovered he actually liked the taste when mixed with a sweet syrup from his homeworld. A Cathari aide found that the caffeine helped her focus during long negotiations. Small changes. Tiny moments of connection. That was how trust was built between species. Katie Monroe watched from across the lounge one morning as Danny taught a young alien how to use the pour-over. The creature was clumsy and spilled water everywhere, but Danny was patient. He guided its hands with gentle instructions, never showing frustration. This was not what she had expected when she came to Harmony Prime. She had expected politics and negotiations and formal agreements. Instead, the biggest diplomatic breakthrough of her career had come from a cup of coffee and a man who just wanted to make his morning drink in peace. Security. Chief Gareth approached and stood beside her. He was watching Danny too. Your assistant has done more for human relations than any treaty, Gareth said. Katie smiled. He does not see it that way. He just thinks he is making coffee. Perhaps that is why it works. He is genuine. He does not perform for an audience. He simply lives his life and invites others to share it. That is very wise, Chief. Gareth shrugged, a gesture he had learned from watching humans. I have been studying your species. You are full of surprises. Across the room, Danny finished teaching his student. The alien proudly poured its first cup of properly brewed coffee. It tasted terrible, honestly. Danny could tell from the uneven pour. But the alien was so happy that Danny did not have the heart to say anything. He just smiled and raised his own cup in celebration. Somewhere in the galaxy, there were still species who feared humans. There were still conflicts and misunderstandings waiting to happen. The universe was vast and full of strangers who did not know each other. But here on Harmony Prime, in a diplomatic lounge overlooking the stars, a human and an alien clinked their cups together and shared a moment of peace. It was not much. Just two creatures from different worlds, drinking bitter water and learning to trust each other. But sometimes, that was enough. Danny took a sip of his coffee and smiled. The taste was perfect. The company was strange but welcome. And the future, for once, felt a little bit brighter. He had come to this station as an assistant, a nobody who carried documents and followed orders. Now he was something more. Not a hero, not a legend, but something better. He was a bridge between worlds, one cup of coffee at a time.